everybody, and welcome back to another episode. We are in a slightly different place today because there's several different reasons, all of which you probably don't care about. It's just going to be for the next 2 episodes, and then we'll be back to the gothic glam set as usual. So stick with me. If you're listening to the podcast, won't make any difference. I'm using a slightly different microphone, but you shouldn't notice anything different. And let's get into the show. Welcome back to our yearly roundup of all the weird news that has happened in 2021. If you're new around here and you've missed the last few episodes which featured all the weird news from the first quarter of 2021, then make sure you head back and watch those after this one, because they're chock full of strangeness which I think you might just be interested in learning about. I'm back today with 2 more weird tales from the year just past, and as a reminder, this won't be your usual news roundup. This is strictly the stuff that makes you go, what? As quite frankly, politics, the global panny-D, and the general destruction of the planet are not the kind of energy we want to be knowingly dragging into the new year. Now, that's not to say that these stories don't dally with the dark side, because they most definitely do, but there's also some light-hearted strangeness too. But don't worry, if anything is going to be hideously awful, then I'll give you a heads up first. So with the disclaimer out of the way, let's jump into July and August. Stick with me, I'll explain in a mo. Before we do that, if you're new here, then hi, my name's Nikki, and I make podcasts and videos about all sorts of weird stuff, so if you're into that, which I have a sneaking suspicion you might be, then please hit subscribe so we can hang out together again. And if you're not new here, then welcome back, old fiend. Nice to see you again. July was seemingly a very quiet time for weird news. Apparently, the only thing of any note was Spamhenge. Yes, Spamhenge. Matthew Richardson from Somerset has dedicated his spare time since 2014 to making replicas of Stonehenge. From food. His weirdest recreations of the prehistoric structure have been made from unlikely building materials such as kiwi fruit, leeks, candy floss, and even peas. However, all of those pale in comparison to the mighty Spamhenge, which he says he is the most proud of. When Matthew posted the photo of the meat sculpture online in July, people were astounded at his skill. In a turn of events though, Matt says he's only ever been to the actual Stonehenge once, and isn't really that bothered by the structure itself, but he loves the challenges recreating the landmark from food gives him. For those of you listening to the podcast, there's a picture on the YouTube video right now, so click the link in the show notes and it will bring you to the picture. And that, ladies and gentlemen, and my non-binary friends, was July. Now, after that light-hearted start, we're just about to head down a very dark path. This topic is heavy and not particularly pleasant, so I'm just giving you a heads up now if you want to skip to the next story, which isn't horrific. I'll leave a timestamp in the description below. Now, I'm going to have to be a little bit careful with my language here, as I think YouTube is probably just going to hold back this video if I say anything too explicit or touch on any words that it doesn't like, so there may be some more tiptoeing around the point than I would usually do, and there's some things you may have to draw your own conclusions on, particularly when it comes to some of the darker points of this case. Also, as this is a newer case, and you know I'm not a fan of covering newer topics out of respect for the families involved, I'll be keeping some of the details as vague as possible on purpose. Matthew Taylor Coleman, a 40-year-old owner of a surf school, was charged in early August for ending the lives of his 2 children. Coleman, who was meant to be going on a family holiday along with his wife, left without her and took the children in a van across the border from their home in Santa Barbara, California. Coleman took the 2 children to a hotel on the California-Mexico border, and they stayed overnight. The next day, Coleman left the hotel before dawn with the 2-year-old boy and 10-month-old girl, but he returned to the hotel alone. The children were later discovered on a ranch by a farm worker. Both of them had fatal injuries to their chests. The children's mother called the police as she became increasingly concerned for her family's welfare, but they weren't tracked down in time to save them. Coleman's wife said she didn't have any inkling that the children were in danger and no reason to believe anything was going to happen to them. After Coleman's children were discovered at the ranch, the police were on the lookout for him and managed to trace his iPhone. This led them to believe he was going to cross the border back into the States, and it was here that they detained him for questioning. Coleman instantly admitted to the crime and said he'd ended the lives of his 2 children. He said he believed that they were going to turn into monsters, and for the sake of the world, he did what he did to save humanity. The item which was used to carry out the ordeal was something Coleman used in his spare time as a keen fisherman, a fishing spear. When questioned by the FBI, the main reason Coleman stated for the abhorrent situation was that he had been enlightened by the teachings of QAnon. Now, for those of you who don't know about QAnon, there are many beliefs which I can't talk about on YouTube, and I'm not sure if even mentioning their name will get me in trouble, but safe to say it's not good. Coleman said he believed that his wife had passed on serpent DNA to their 2 children, and to stop further problems in the future, he thought the course of action he took was the only thing to do. Now, the lizard people theory isn't actually from QAnon. It derives from David Icke, who came up with the theory many moons ago, and it's been adopted by modern-day conspiracy theorists who use it now to explain a lot of different things. Basically, we're apparently being ruled by reptilian overlords wearing human suits, and we just haven't realised it yet. When police subsequently seized Coleman's computer and phone as part of their investigations, they discovered that he'd been spending multiple hours browsing and posting on conspiracy theory-led message boards, which is where he said he obtained the information, which ultimately led to him committing his crime. At the time of writing, Coleman is in prison, awaiting trial, and if found guilty, he could find himself with the death penalty. Currently, he has said he isn't guilty, but it remains to be seen how he will plead in court when he gets there, and what will happen as a result of the trial. But hopefully, justice is served. Okay, after that horrific story, I've got something a little lighter for you. A statue which was thought to be the oldest in London is now even older than was first thought. The likeness of King Alfred the Great, a former king of the Anglo-Saxons, has stood in Trinity Square in Southwark in London for many years. But it turns out this statue may have moved around London and also been somebody else. Now, Alfred was immortalised for a number of different things he did, mainly defeating the Vikings and forging a united England. But he also helped shape society by promoting literacy and education amongst his loyal subjects. The statue, which is nowadays off the beaten path, would have at the time been slap bang in the heart of London, just a short walk from London Bridge. Today, the square Alfred stands in is favoured by film crews due to its central but hidden location, and can often be seen popping up on screen. So the next time you watch something set in London, watch out for Alfred lurking in the background. Anyway, I digress. When experts began trying to date Alfred, and by that I mean working out when he was made, not matching with him on Tinder, they originally thought he may have been moved to Southwark from Westminster in the early 1800s. The initial thought being that he matched some other statues that once adorned Westminster Hall inside the Palace of Westminster. A quick history lesson on Westminster Hall, time for another digression. The hall was built in 1097 to house the then King William II, and for a long time was the largest hall in the whole of the UK. It now sits within the Houses of Parliament and is the only surviving part of the old palace. Okay, back to the statue again. It's thought that when the palace underwent an upgrade, much like a refresh at Madame Tussauds to get rid of the unpopular celebrities, Alfred was deposited elsewhere in the city to get some newer statues in. When art historians looked at Alfred again last year, they realised that, actually, the statue may have been something else entirely before it became the king. In fact, it's quite likely that the statue itself once stood elsewhere in London, even before Westminster, and that it was more than likely a Roman goddess. How incredibly cool is that? Instead of completely starting from scratch, it's thought that many old and out-of-favour statues were rounded up from around the city and recarved into more recognisable characters from history. The base of Alfred is thought to have been the goddess Minerva and dates from the 2nd century, which I don't know if any of you out there struggle to compute numbers, but basically I can cope up to just about the Tudor period, and then anything before that, my brain can't cope with it. It's too far back. However, someone else has done the maths on my behalf, thanks to the Londonist blog, and it works out that this statue was around 700 years even before Alfred was born. I think I might have to take a quick break. I think my head is going to explode. The reason conservationists could date this statue back to Roman times is due to the type of stone that was used. Bath stone, which was a very popular material for Roman sculptors. However, when they also checked the top half, they realised that the stone which had been placed on top to create the newer part was actually codestone, a type of artificial stone which wasn't actually created until sometime during the 1770s. So this mishmash now threw up a load of other questions, and it seemed quite likely that Alfred didn't actually sit in Westminster Hall after all. Similar fragments of stone have been collected at Tabard Square, a known Roman hotspot from back in the day, and so it's likely that Alfred was from somewhere else nearby, but that's yet to be tracked down. The statue, which was once off limits to the public, kept within the private garden of the square, has now been opened up to the great unwashed. So if you ever find yourself in Southwark with a bit of spare time, go and see if you can find Alfred and work out where the joins are. Thank you for joining me for those weird stories. I hope you enjoyed them. You know the drill by now if you've been around for a while, but if you are new here, then please subscribe, come and follow me on my social media, and if you like the show and want me to make more, then please consider becoming a Patreon supporter so you can get your mitts on exclusive content, an extra episode per month, some goodies through the post, and depending on the tier you pick, have your name read out at the end of the episode, like our executive Patreon producers, Amy, Barry, Bethan, Kate, Mary, Ren, Sam, Sarah and Veronica, and a huge thanks to all of my other patrons too. If a long-term commitment isn't your thing, but you just wanted to send a tip or a gift from my Amazon wishlist, then I would massively appreciate that. And I'll leave all the links to the show notes on the podcast in the description on the YouTube video. And there's also a nifty little button on YouTube now where it says thanks, which is like a little virtual tip jar, and it's just underneath the video. So if you're feeling generous, then that's an option as well. An enormous thank you for even considering doing any of these things, as it means the absolute world when I get any notifications like that or a surprise parcel popping through the door. And there's definitely been quite a few of them at the moment, and they do really, really help. So thank you very, very much, because it really is the best. And also, you're the best. And I also just wanted to say, if some of that support stuff isn't something that you can do at the moment, then just tell your friends. It really, really helps. Just spread the show around, pop it on your social media, mention it to somebody you work with. It really helps the show to grow. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I've been Nikki Druce, and I'll see you ghouls next time for September, when it gets even weirder as we have a pop star attacked by a pig. Just come back then. You know you can't miss out on that.